Hi, this is On Imagination, and I'm taking a minute to talk on stigma and class systems. This is something that, as I started to do it, I knew I was going to do it. I knew I was going to have this problem, so I did a lot of research prior to this happening because I knew it was going to be something I contend with. I am talking about breaking through class systems, like breaking through stigmas. I have personally overcome 4 stigmas. I started off with domesticated slavery and the mental health stigma. So right away, I surpassed 2 class systems. I surpassed the mental health stigma, and I also surpassed the female woman scientist stigma. And I have a lot to say about stigmas and class systems. And I just did it again. I just broke through the last one, and now I'm in high class now, and I'm completely different mindset, completely different world. And it's the first time where I'm sitting back in it, and there is this massive comfort, like, oh, this is finally, and I'll tell you what it is. When you are born, you are very much already wherever it is you are going to be. If you are dreaming about being a billionaire, it's because your dreams are billionaire sized. Millionaires, billionaires, the extremely wealthy are the people who have large imaginations. These are the people who have dreams that are so big that people who can't dream beyond a paycheck to paycheck can't fathom ever being wealthy or rich. It's the size that you are. So if you have vast billionaire sized dreams, you've got a billionaire inside of you. If you are millionaire sized dreams, that's who you are. And then you've got people who would never dream about having more than living paycheck to paycheck. And the reason why is because it's the money and the dream fits literally the lifestyle. And when I went through the class systems, I noticed that there were 3 types of growth. And it took me a long time to learn that there were 3 types of growth. The first one was the mental growth. And that one we all know about. But the other one that I was not expecting was your social growth. This one was hard. This was the hardest part. The next one is a consequence, which is your financial growth. That one is is the consequence that follows after the mental and the social. And the mental health is the very first thing that has to change. That is you changing your mindset long before anything else. It's going to change your language, and it's going to shift your priorities and your ethics. And then your social growth is going to change the people around you. And you're going to see your social growth. And this is where it got really interesting is it's the people you attract. The people you attract are your social growth. That's who you are. And it's not the people you look for, it's the people that you attract. So if you're attracting paycheck to paycheck people, it's because you still haven't grown. But when you start attracting billionaires, now you've grown. When you start attracting millionaires, now that's where you are. And if you're sitting here going, oh my God, I'm all attracting as narcissists, it's because you haven't fixed the mindset yet. And this is absolutely a sequence, just one more sequence. And your mental health is the summation of your mindset, the language you are using, and your ethics. That's it right there. You want to change your mindset, you're going to have to change your language, you're going to have to change your ethics. And in order to do that, well, that's my course. That's all of my course. It's online. And that's all I focused on when I was doing the healing garden. And I it took me a long time to realize that social growth was the second stage of your mental healing. And what ended up happening was I would grow, and I would lose all my friends, and then I would be alone for a long time. I had about a year where I was totally isolated. And the devastation of that loss was substantial. And then after a year, I started to collect let's call that round 2 of people. And then I grew and I lost round 2 of people. And then I grew again and I ended up with a third tier of people. And I just grew again these last 2 weeks. And it was yesterday, it was the last 2, 3 days. that I started to attract high class people. I started to, like, all these billionaires started to come to me. And I went, completely different ballgame, completely different mindset. And, I talk to them, I mingle with them, I socialize with them, I work with them. And the language is completely different. And the reason why you're attracting them is because you're talking like them. So it's all about the language. And I was exposed to them for approximately 2 months. And that was enough to finally flip a switch in my brain that shifted me to the next growth stage. And I felt it happen over the last couple days where I'm like, oh, and suddenly all the people that I could tolerate, I couldn't stand it anymore. And the reason why is, the first thing is, they were highly insecure. That was the first thing right off the bat that I noticed. They were insanely insecure. They constantly wanted me to eggshell walk around them. And I don't do eggshell walking. I do not accommodate eggshell walking. And they wanted me to change my language to accommodate their eggshell walking. Now, language is a reflection of mental health, and it attracts your social growth. So I knew that if I changed my language, I wouldn't be attracting the billionaires, the world leaders, and presidents of countries if I changed my language. So I'm not about to change my language. I just worked my ass off to get here. And when I did that, it was, and this is where it really just started to flow. And suddenly it was this massive alignment. And when the alignment matched up, my subconscious mind was already, and this is the most beautiful part of all this, my subconscious mind led the entire show. My subconscious mind was in charge the whole time. And I kept using the same terminology, the mantras. And the more mantras I use, the more my subconscious mind just beeline. So my mantras, my language, kept my subconscious mind aligned with my purpose and mission. And my subconscious mind drove the whole show. Now, my conscious awareness was late to the party. My conscious awareness was late to the party. And that was my biggest problem, was my conscious awareness kept trying to drive the show. And it kept trying to go somewhere else. The people that I was surrounded with kept pulling me back. And I had to constantly push them away, pull them back. And then there was a period where I realized I was toggling between, I was definitely in tier 8, but I was also trying to hold on to tier 2 because I thought they were miserable. And this was the massive epiphany I had today, where I realized they're not unhappy. They love complaining. They really do. That's why they're there. And people who are unhappy change. People who are happy don't change. That's really what it comes down to. And the people who are unhappy will complain, will tell you that that's not true, but then they'll do none of the work. And the reason why is because their happiness is literally greater than any other happiness that they think they've got anywhere else, which is why they're not changing. And I was not happy anywhere else. I wasn't. So I was doing the work to push myself through the stages to get where I am because I was not happy. And I thought, well, if they're saying they're unhappy, then of course they're not happy. But then I saw them not changing, doing the same behavior. And I went, well, why? I couldn't understand it. And then I realized the reason why they weren't doing any of the work was because they really aren't unhappy. They love complaining. That's why they're where they are. And what really was the massive wake-up call for me is, after I broke through 2 class systems, a mental health stigma, and the whole concept of female scientist, one massive thing slammed into my face. Those things aren't real, and they're fucking made up. It's bullshit. There was never any stigma. There was never any stigma. There was never any misogyny. There was never any class system. It is a bullshit, fictitious excuse that people made up, that I made up at every level of growth. Oh, it's the class system. It's the class. No, it's not. No, it's not. It is the language you're using. It is the mindset you have. And it is the ethics you lack. It is the education you lack. The resources are there. They're all over the place. I knew how to find them. I knew how to make them. I invented them in some cases. And I did the work to get through them. only to realize the only obstacle was me learning the language I needed to learn to change my mindset and being honest with myself. It was all just about the work. And when I got into the world of the scientists, there was no man standing at the door going, "You're not allowed in here. You're a girl." That did not happen. That was not there. No man ever told me I could not be a scientist. No man ever told me that. My father gave me his disapproval bullshit, but that's not new. But that was never the problem. And that sure as fuck didn't ever stop me. It was all about the mindset. And the mental health stigma was all about the language I was using. And it took me a long time to realize people treated me like I was an idiot because I used the language of idiots. People treated me like I was mentally ill because I used the language of the mentally ill. People treated me like a victim because I used the language of a victim. And when I realized this and I changed my language, they changed the way they approached me completely. I saw this across the board every single time. And when I started to surround myself with billionaires, I started to use their language. I started to talk like them. And then while I was going through that stage of toggling between the low class, the middle class, and the high class, and then I had the high class language and I refused to give it up because I knew what the language did. And then I had low class, miserable, unhealthy people telling me that I needed to break my language and change it for them. No. What they were really doing was they were being exposed to billionaire, healthy, successful language, and they didn't like it. And they weren't about to change because they like where they were. And that's when I realized if I stayed around them, I would have to be subjected to their language. But what I noticed the common denominator is they spent a lot of their time attacking people like me, bashing people like me. Now, I grew up in a white supremacist town where I'm going to explain. I'm going to roll it right out here for you. And I'm going to tell you what I saw as a white girl in the middle of a white town. It was in the comments they made, the little subtleties, the grumbling. It was all in the grumbling. It started off with them grumbling about Black people. There were no Black people in this town. They would grumble about Spanish people. There were no Spanish people in this town. There were no Latinos or Hispanics. Oh, but they grumbled. They would grumble about all the immigrants, and they would grumble. And I heard that grumbling every day. Every time my father made a phone call and he had to press 2 for Spanish or 1 for English, he would grumble. But then a Black person or an Hispanic person would come around, and that grumbling, they cranked up the volume every time. They would turn up that volume, and that grumbling became downright degradation and mockery. And then when the Black person moved back out of town or the Hispanic decided to quit the job and leave because they didn't want to hear it, they turned that volume back down to grumbling. That is how I lived for 40 years. And if I tried to speak Spanish around my family, they'd turn that volume up and start screaming at me that I'm not Spanish. I need to not speak like that. If I wanted to talk about my Irish heritage, they took that grumbling and they turned it up to make sure that I knew that my Irish was not allowed around their English asses. And then once I was done with that, they turned it right back down to the grumbling. That's how racism works. That is exactly how racism works. That's how you get white supremacy. That's how you get purified villages of just white people. It works the same way with wealth as well. The wealthy do come around the poverty all the time, but the impoverished sit there and grumble. And as soon as they realize they're around somebody rich, oh, they crank that up and they bitch and they complain. And then you get to a point where you just don't want to hear it anymore. So you just kind of pull yourself away because you don't want to be exposed to hearing about how much somebody hates you. And when I pulled away, I heard that grumbling get turned right back down exactly the way they do. The reason why the class systems exists is because poor people are just narcissistic bitchers. And as soon as they get somebody around them who's not like them, they turn that volume up. They love being where they are. Now, every now and then you're going to get somebody who really fucking hates it, and they're going to be busting their ass trying to get out. And those are my people. Those are my people. So this is how I did it. This is exactly how I did it. I learned the language. I learned the language of billionaires. I learned the language of world leaders. I learned the language of Tony Robbins. I listened to him day in and day out, over and over. I learned the language. I mimicked the language on purpose. I learned how to talk like them, think like them, act like them, move like them. I studied their behavior. And the more I did that, the more I separated and the more I could feel myself when I did get around somebody who was poor, I could see their distasteful mental illness and lack of education. And I just went, oh, yeah, no, thanks. I heard them calling me a snob long before I was wealthy. While I was still a slave, they would call people like me a snob just because I valued something better. They are poor because they've chosen to be poor, because that's where they want to be, because that is where they are happy, which is why they're not growing. There is no class system. It's all in their head. They invented the class system. So it got to a point where, and this is where I was today, is I realized that the difference between somebody who's a billionaire and somebody who's not is a standard. It's an ethic. It's a refusal to settle, a refusal to lower your standards. It's a refusal to waste your time complaining, and instead you take action to do. Same thing with the mental illness. I noticed that people who are victims talk like a victim. People who are narcissists talk like a victim. And here's what I noticed. Empaths use the exact same language as narcissists. It's an identical language. It's extraordinary. Pedophiles have the exact same language. When I learned to unlearn the language, when I stopped learning the language, I stopped attracting them. It was extraordinary how much the language repels and attracts people. Here's the flip side of this. When I changed the language, not only did it not attract them, it repelled them. So then I realized that if you unlearn, or actually if you learn the narcissist language and then you change it over to a different language, it will literally disgust them and they will go away. The same thing works with poor people. I found out that the majority of poor people were narcissists. When I got over to the billionaire side, everyone's having a great time, not because they were born great. It's because they appreciate it, because they, like me, climbed out of the sewer to get to where they are, and they know how to indulge in the work of their sweat, just like I do. But the poor people who didn't grow stayed behind and instead decided to waste their time looking through social media, commenting and complaining. Now you have a class system divide. So when I changed that language, what I noticed was that social growth also changing. After the third tier, I realized that the people around me were unrelatable. I realized that they wanted me to stay around while they continued to complain and bash about the very person I was trying to become. And I'd get away from them. I would feel lousy. I would feel miserable. I would come to you and I would feel like, while I'm doing my podcast, like I just got done being told how horrible other people think I am. It was horrible. It was miserable. And I remember this one day, this woman posted complaining how intelligent people never share their knowledge. I have an entire podcast, book, course, material, doing nothing but sharing my knowledge. She just wanted to complain. I was literally right there. Like, do you have any idea what I've done for the last 10 years, but to share my knowledge? And when you realize, when you're mentally healthy or when you're trying to seek mental health, you are not just looking to outgrow your mental health. It's not possible to change your mental health and keep your social group. It's not. You will not be able to do it. And that is something that is going to change as you grow. You are going to leave behind your social growth. Of all the people, I have lost everybody except 2 of my 3 children and my mother. Only 3 people have stayed with me through the entire process. My mother and 2 of my 3 children. And when you get to the other side, I'm going to tell you right now, it's fucking worth it. It is absolutely worth it. Absolutely worth it. When you get to the other side and you're finally in the tier that fits you, what ended up happening was my imagination is this big. And the paycheck to paycheck people, they've got imagination that's this big. I couldn't handle it. I could not stand it. The millionaires, they've got imaginations this big. But when you've got the billionaires and their minds are this big, that's how you think. That's how you feel. That's how you dream. That's your tier. And your happiness is not going to be achieved until you get to that tier. That is where you are happy. Now, if you've got a paycheck to paycheck person, That's where they're going to be happy. And that's okay. But the millionaires are going to be happy in this group. But if you're one of these persons, you are going to need to get to this group. And that's what I teach you. That is something I can do. That is where I go. That's what I know. And as soon as I got here, as soon as I started attracting those people, as soon as they started contacting me, it was powerful. It was extraordinary. It was suddenly a realization of, oh, fuck, damn, this is worth it. Because it's the first time I can finally be myself. And here's the real kicker with all of this is I'm suddenly not abnormal. I'm normal for a billionaire. I've always been a billionaire. It's something that's always been in my head. Since I was impoverished, since I was a slave, I've been a billionaire. And getting to this stage finally, being in this atmosphere, being around those people, suddenly it's, oh my God, I am finally among my own kind. And the kind is not the money. That's just a consequence. What the kind is it's the mindset. It's the priority. It's the, all right, now let's make plans. Where are we going to put this money? What are we going to drive forward? What are we going to build with this? And that's now where my mind has always been. But instead of focusing on how am I going to do it, I'm now focusing on, all right, what am I going to do? And that's all I'm thinking about now is, what do I want to do? I already know what I'm going to do. I already know what I want to build. I already know how I'm going to implement it. Now I can just do it. And I've got the people in place where I can just do it. And this is the massive, massive difference between the different class systems that aren't actually class systems at all. What it is a language, an education, and a mindset. It's a priority. It's a, how big is your dream? How big can you dream? And if you are a big dreamer who's going, oh my God, I need to be a billionaire because I got big dreams. Yeah. Now that is what we're talking about. And it's a completely different mindset. It really is a completely different mindset. And it's definitely worth it. All the loss I have suffered is absolutely been worth it. All of the work was worth it. Because once you get to wherever it is you belong, it's suddenly a realization that you don't feel like a freak. You never did. You never were. You were just in the wrong tier. That's all it was. And how far away from your tier you are or you were is going to be a metric for where it is you need to go. If you feel like an uber freak, you are really, really far away from where you need to be. If you feel like you are broken, you are absolutely in the left field. You are so far away from your true tier. That's your problem. Knowing your true tier is vital to knowing everything. How far can you see yourself going? How famous do you see yourself being? How wealthy do you see yourself? What do you see yourself doing with that money? That's going to define your place in life. And until you get there, you're not going to be okay. And it's not that the billionaire is hard to achieve. And this is something that's really vital. It is not hard for a billionaire to achieve the billionaire's tier. It is not hard for the millionaire to achieve the millionaire tier. What's hard is you being in a tier that is not at all meant for you. That's hard. What's hard is living as a paycheck or as a slave when you belong a billionaire. What's hard is living as a billionaire when you belong in the paycheck category. So if you don't know which tier you belong in, that is going to do a lot to seriously make you feel like you're broken, feel like a freak, feel like you're abnormal, like you can never be normal. And once you start to realize that your personality type is absolutely lined up with your tier, your wealth, your mental health, your social status, your finance, your education, it's a massive package. And if your package is not completely aligned, you're not going to be okay. And that is absolutely a huge part of all of this. That's what this is all about. And the hardest part of this was learning that the social growth is part of it. That you're going to leave people behind, but they are leaving themselves behind. They have the ability, just like you, to get off their asses and move out of wherever it is they are. No one has come further than I. No one. No one has more excuse of failure than I. No one else has overcome domesticated slavery of 4 years with literally every type of abuse you can imagine, in addition to almost every mental illness that's out there. And still, I overcame it. Which means now that I'm where I'm at and I'm looking at it, I'm going, what the fuck is your excuse? You don't have one. You are exactly right where you are in life because you want to be. And if you don't want to be where you are, well, then what the fuck are you doing? And why aren't you on your way out the door? Because that's really what it comes down to. If you really want to get out of where you are, you'll do it. You will do it, or you haven't suffered enough. That is a very real thing. You've got to suffer a certain amount before you finally reach your breaking point and you say, I've had enough. How the fuck do I get out of here? And that is a testament to either how happy you really are where you are and or how much you really have suffered. So either you haven't suffered nearly as much, or you really are happy right where you are. Because when you're not happy, when you really have suffered, you don't sit around in it. You get the fuck out of Dodge fast. And suddenly it's never about how. It's never about how. Because the resources have always been there. There is no class system. There's just you and you not being honest with yourself. When you decide you finally want to get out there and reach whatever destination it is, it's not about the money first, and then the money will mean that I'm there. The money comes last. It's always your mindset, your language is first, then your social class, then your finance. And when you start attracting the social people in that group, that's when you've made it. That is when you've made it. When they start calling you because they heard from somebody else who you are, that is when you've made it. When they want to talk to you. When you stop attracting narcissists and you start attracting millionaires or billionaires. When you stop attracting paycheck to paycheck and impoverished people. When you stop attracting pedophiles and instead you're attracting millionaires, TV producers, that's when you finally have made it. It's right there what your attraction level is. Because that's who you are. That's always who you are. And it's always what language you are using. Thank you so much. May the truth always find you.